The bitter wind howled through the broken windows of Sweetwater Station as Willow Reeves clutched her infant daughter tighter against her chest, trying to shield the baby from the unforgiving November chill of 1876. 3 days she'd been stranded here, her meager savings depleted, her husband 6 feet under Wyoming soil after outlaws had ambushed their wagon 2 weeks prior. The once bustling railway stop now stood nearly abandoned in the off-season, leaving Willow alone with 6-month-old Emma, a threadbare shawl, and desperation clawing at her heart. "Hush now, little one," Willow whispered, rocking the fussing infant. Her own stomach growled fiercely, having saved the last of their food for the baby. The station agent had taken pity on her the first night, letting her sleep on the hard wooden bench rather than forcing her outside. But his patience was wearing thin. Tomorrow, he'd made clear, she needed to board a train or move along with what money. He didn't particularly care. Willow's head drooped, exhaustion finally claiming her as she drifted into fitful sleep, her baby secure in her arms. She didn't hear the spurs jingling against the wooden platform or the station door creaking open, admitting both a blast of cold air and a tall figure wrapped in a heavy duster. Owen Aldridge stamped the snow from his boots, his gaze immediately drawn to the young woman, an infant huddled on the bench. He'd been riding hard for 2 days to catch the morning train to Cheyenne, but the sight before him stopped him cold. Something in the woman's face, even in sleep, lined with worry and sorrow, tugged at him. He'd seen that look before. In his own mirror after losing everything in the war. The station agent emerged from his office, nodding at Owen. "Evening, Mr. Aldridge. Train's delayed till morning on account of the storm." "Who's she?" Owen asked, his voice low as he gestured toward the sleeping woman. The agent sighed. "Widow, from what I gather. Husband killed by road agents west of here. Been sitting there 3 days now, money's gone. Got nowhere to go with that baby." Owen removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair as he considered the sleeping pair. His ranch was 15 miles outside town, isolated, rough, but warm and safe. The decision formed before he fully realized it. When Willow stirred at dawn, she found herself being observed by a pair of intense blue eyes. The stranger sat across from her, hat in his hands, his expression unreadable beneath his neatly trimmed beard. Instinctively, she tightened her hold on Emma. "Morning, madam," he said, his voice quiet but carrying a natural authority. "Name's Owen Aldridge. I've got a ranch outside of town." Willow straightened, trying to muster whatever dignity remained after sleeping in a public station for days. "I'm Willow Reeves. This is my daughter, Emma." The man nodded, studying her with an intensity that made her both nervous and curious. He wasn't looking at her with pity or dismissal, but with something else, respect perhaps. "Station agent tells me you've been here a few days now." Willow's cheeks flushed. "We'll be moving on soon. Madam," Owen interrupted gently, "there's a blizzard coming in. No trains for at least 3 days now." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've got a wagon outside. You can come home with me." Willow stiffened, immediately suspicious. She'd heard stories of women in her position falling prey to men with false kindness. "I don't know you, Mr. Aldridge." "No, you don't," he agreed. "But I've got a warm house, food, and you'll have your own room with a lock on the door. When the weather clears, I'll bring you wherever you want to go." He stood slowly, as if not wanting to startle her. "Or you can stay here. Your choice, Mrs. Reeves." Emma began to whimper, the cold and hunger finally overwhelming the infant. Willow looked down at her daughter's red, pinched face and felt her resolve crumble. What choice did she really have? "Why would you help us?" she asked, needing to understand. Something flickered in Owen's eyes, a memory. Perhaps. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing." He gestured toward the door. "My offer stands." Gathering what little she had, a small carpet bag containing a spare dress, Emma's blanket, and her husband's pocket watch, Willow followed Owen to his wagon. He helped her climb up, ensuring she and Emma were securely bundled against the cold before setting off. The journey to Owen's ranch passed mostly in silence, broken only by Emma's occasional cries and the howling wind. Willow studied her benefactor's profile from beneath her lashes. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 to her 23 years, with a strong jaw and hands that held the reins with quiet confidence. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was a steadiness to him, that she found herself drawn to despite her wariness. The ranch appeared as they crested a hill modest but well-maintained, with a main house, barn, and several outbuildings nestled in a protected valley. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth within. "It's not much," Owen said, misreading her expression. "But it's solid." "It's beautiful," Willow replied honestly. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, the sight of this sheltered homestead felt like finding an oasis in the desert. He helped her down from the wagon, guiding her toward the house while the swirling snow intensified around them. Inside, the warmth enveloped her immediately, along with the sense of coffee and wood smoke. The main room was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace, solid furniture, shelves lined with books that surprised her. "Rosa!" Owen called, and an older Mexican woman emerged from what Willow presumed was the kitchen. "This is Mrs. Reeves and her daughter. They'll be staying with us until the weather clears." Rosa's eyebrows rose slightly, but she offered a warm smile. "The blue room is ready, senor. I will bring hot water." Her gaze fell on Emma, whose little face peeked out from the blanket. "And milk for the bebe." "Rosa Hernandez keeps this place running," Owen explained as the woman bustled away. "Been with my family since I was a boy." He showed Willow to a small but clean bedroom, true to his word about the lock on the door. "Rest. Rosa will bring the food. We'll talk more when you're ready." When he left, Willow sat heavily on the bed, Emma in her arms, overwhelmed by the sudden turn in her fortune. She had no illusions their situation remained precarious. But for now, they were warm, would soon be fed, and for the first time since her husband's death, Willow allowed herself to shed the tears she'd been holding back. By the time Rosa arrived with a tray and warm water for washing, Willow had composed herself. The older woman helped her settle Emma, who drank eagerly from the bottle of warm milk. "The senor, he is a good man," Rosa said as she straightened the already neat room. "Too much alone, but good." "Why would he help strangers?" Willow asked, still puzzled by Owen's generosity. Rosa's expression softened. "The war took much from him, his family, his faith in people, for a time." She gestured around the room. "But not his heart. He knows what it is to be lost." Later, washed and changed into her clean dress, Emma fed and sleeping in a makeshift cradle Rosa had prepared. Willow ventured into the main room. Owen sat at a desk by the window, writing in a ledger. He stood when she entered. "Better?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." Willow clasped her hands, feeling awkward. "Mr. Aldridge, I want you to know I intend to repay your kindness. I'm not looking for charity." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Didn't think you were, Mrs. Reeves." "Willow," she said impulsively. "Please call me Willow." He nodded. "Owen, then." They stood in silence for a moment before he gestured to the table, where Rosa had set out a simple but hearty meal. "You should eat." Over stew and biscuits, Willow found herself telling Owen her story, how she and her husband Thomas had left Missouri for the promise of land in Montana, how the attack had happened so quickly neither of them had time to react, how she'd managed to get them to the nearest settlement, where Thomas had died of his wounds 3 days later. "I'm sorry," Owen said when she finished, and she believed he meant it. "What will you do now?" Willow stared into her empty bowl. "I have a cousin in Denver. I wrote to her, but haven't received a reply. I was trying to reach her when—" She shrugged. "Well, you know the rest." "You can stay here until you hear from her," Owen offered. "Or figure out another plan." "I couldn't impose—" "It's no imposition," he interrupted firmly. "Winter's setting in. Roads will be bad even after this storm passes. Besides," he added, glancing toward the window, where snow continued to fall heavily, "I could use the help around here. Rosa does too much already. And I lost my ranch hand last month when he decided to try his luck in California." Willow studied him, trying to discern his true intentions. "What kind of help?" "Cooking, mending, general upkeep of the house while I tend the livestock." He met her gaze directly. "I'll pay fair wages. You can save for wherever you decide to go next." It was a generous offer, too generous, perhaps. But something about Owen Aldridge made Willow trust him, despite her natural caution. Perhaps it was the respect with which he treated her, or the way he'd looked at Emma with gentle eyes, rather than seeing her as a burden. "All right," she agreed, "until spring, or until I hear from my cousin, whichever comes first." Owen nodded, satisfaction briefly crossing his features before his usual reserved expression returned. We have a deal then. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Willow listened to the storm rage outside, while Emma slept peacefully beside her. She should have felt nothing but relief and gratitude, yet beneath those emotions ran a current of something else, awareness of the man whose roof now sheltered them, whose quiet strength had already begun to intrigue her far more than was wise. The blizzard raged for 3 days, confining them to the house. Willow quickly settled into the routine of the ranch, rising early to help Rosa prepare breakfast before Owen went out to the barn. She learned that he ran a modest but successful operation, breeding and training horses that he sold throughout the territory. The work kept him outdoors most of the day. But evenings found the four of them gathered in the main room, Owen often reading from one of his many books, while Willow mended clothes and Rosa knitted by the fire, Emma either sleeping or cooing, contentedly in her improvised cradle. On the fourth morning, Willow woke to sunshine streaming through the window. The storm had passed, leaving a brilliant white landscape that sparkled in the cold light. After breakfast, while Rosa watched Emma, Willow ventured outside, breathing deeply of the crisp air. She found Owen by the corral, working with a spirited young mare. Willow stopped to watch, admiring the patient way he moved around the nervous animal, speaking in low tones she couldn't quite catch. There was a different quality to him out here, more relaxed, more himself somehow. "She's beautiful," Willow called when he'd finished the exercise, leading the horse to cool down. Owen looked up, seeming surprised but not displeased to see her. "Temperamental, but she's coming along." He patted the mare's neck. "Did you need something?" "Just some fresh air," Willow replied, approaching the fence. "It's good to see the sun again." He nodded, studying her with that direct gaze that always made her feel strangely exposed. "How are you settling in?" "Well enough. Rosa's been showing me around the house." She hesitated before adding, "I noticed you have quite a collection of books." Something in his expression lightened. "My mother was a school teacher before she married my father. She believed education was important, even on a ranch in the middle of nowhere." "Was?" Willow asked softly, sensing the story behind his words. Owen's jaw tightened slightly. "They died during the war. Raiders, not regular soldiers from either side, just men taking advantage of the chaos." He said it matter-of-factly, but Willow could see the old pain beneath his composure. "I was away fighting. By the time I came home, there was nothing left but this land." "I'm sorry," Willow said, understanding now what Rosa had meant about him knowing what it was to be lost. "Is that why you helped us? Because you know how it feels?" He was quiet for a long moment, leading the mare back to the stable before answering. "Maybe partly, but mostly because it was the right thing to do." He glanced at her. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" The tour took most of the morning, with Owen showing her the stable where he kept his best horses, the workshop where he crafted and repaired tack, the smokehouse and cold cellar stocked with provisions for winter. Willow was impressed by the efficient operation he ran largely by himself. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked as they walked back toward the house. Owen seemed surprised by the question. "I suppose I did at first, but you get used to your own company." He gave her a sidelong glance. "What about you? Before you met your husband, I mean." "I was never really alone until after Thomas died," Willow admitted. "I grew up with 3 sisters in a house that was always full of noise. Then I married Thomas and—" She shrugged. "Those weeks on the trail after losing him were the first time I'd ever truly been alone. I didn't handle it very well." "I think you handled it just fine," Owen said quietly. "You kept yourself and your daughter alive under circumstances that would break many people. That takes courage." His words warmed her more than they should have. "Thank you, though I'm not sure it was courage so much as having no other choice. That's often when courage matters most." The days fell into a comfortable rhythm as November turned to December. Willow took over much of the cooking, discovering she had a talent for it that Rosa appreciated. Emma thrived in the stable environment, growing plumper and more active each day. And gradually, Willow found herself watching for Owen's return each evening with an anticipation that both excited and frightened her. One evening, after Emma had been put to bed and Rosa had retired for the night, Willow sat by the fire working on a piece of mending. Owen entered from his study, a book in hand. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. Of course, she replied, suddenly conscious of being alone with him in a way that hadn't bothered her before. What are you reading? He held up the volume Poetry by Tennyson. My mother's favorite, he explained. Do you read much? When I can. There wasn't much time for books growing up on a farm, but I always loved stories. She set aside her mending. Would you read some? It's been a long time since I heard good poetry. Owen hesitated, then nodded, opening to a marked page. His voice, usually so practical and straightforward, took on a different quality as he read deeper, more melodic. Willow found herself captivated not just by the words, but by the man reading them, seeing yet another layer to this complex person who had taken them in. When he finished, a comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Willow realized she felt more at peace in that moment than she had in months, perhaps years. Thank you, she said softly. That was lovely. Owen closed the book, his fingers tracing its worn cover. My mother used to read to us every night, no matter how tired she was from the day's work. A faint smile touched his lips. My father pretended it was just for us children, but I'd catch him listening just as intently. They sound like wonderful people. They were. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the space between them. What about your parents? Good people, but hard. Life wasn't easy for them. And they didn't have much patience for things that didn't put food on the table or money in the bank. She twisted the simple gold band she still wore on her finger. They weren't happy when I married Thomas. He had dreams, but not much else. And now? Owen asked carefully. What are your dreams, Willow? The question caught her off guard. Since Thomas's death, since even before that, if she were honest, she'd been focused on survival, not dreams. I don't know anymore, she admitted. Safety for Emma, a roof over our heads. Beyond that, she shook her head. Dreams seem like a luxury I can't afford. Everyone deserves dreams, Owen said with unexpected intensity, even when they seem impossible. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's cry from the bedroom. Willow rose, feeling oddly reluctant to break the moment between them. I should go to her. Owen nodded, also standing. Of course. Good night, Willow. Good night, Owen. She paused at the doorway. Thank you for the poetry. As December deepened, the ranch became more isolated as snow made the roads to town difficult to navigate. Owen made one treacherous journey to collect supplies and mail, returning with news of the outside world, and, to Willow's disappointment, no letter from her cousin in Denver. Perhaps it will come after the holidays, Owen suggested, seeing her fallen expression. Mail moves slowly this time of year. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite their small number. Rosa decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, filling the air with the scent of spices as she baked traditional treats from her homeland. Willow found herself caught up in the preparations, wanting to make the season special for Emma's first Christmas. Even if the baby was too young to remember it, she also secretly worked on gifts for Owen and Rosa during the quiet hours when Emma napped a new scarf for Rosa, knitted from soft yarn, and for Owen, a leather-bound journal she'd found among the supplies, its pages blank and promising. 3 days before Christmas, Owen disappeared for the morning, returning with a small pine tree strapped to his saddle. Thought we should do this properly, he explained, as he set it up in the corner of the main room. His usually solemn face bore a boyish excitement that made Willow's heart flutter strangely. That evening, they decorated the tree with simple ornaments Rosa had saved over the years, along with strings of dried berries and popcorn Willow and Rosa had prepared. Owen lifted Emma so she could help place a star fashioned from tin atop the tree, the baby's delighted giggles filling the room. Watching them together, Willow felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. In just 6 weeks, this place these people had begun to feel like home in a way nothing had since before her parents' farm. The realization terrified her. This arrangement was temporary, she reminded herself firmly. Come spring, she and Emma would move on, as agreed. Yet when Owen caught her eye over Emma's head, his smile transforming his entire face, Willow couldn't help wondering what it might be like to stay. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. They exchanged their simple gifts after breakfast, Rosa exclaiming over the scarf, pressing kisses to Willow's cheeks in thanks. Owen accepting the journal with quiet appreciation, his fingers lingering over the cover. "I have something for you, too," he said, handing Willow a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, she found a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Owen, this is too much." "Open it," he urged gently. The locket contained a tiny portrait of Emma, skillfully rendered in miniature. Willow gasped, looking up at him in wonder. "How did you—" "There's an artist in town who owed me a favor." Owen looked almost embarrassed by her reaction. "I thought you should have something to keep her close, no matter where life takes you." Tears pricked Willow's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. Thank you." Later, after a feast prepared by all three adults and an afternoon of stories and laughter, Willow stood at the window, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. She heard Owen approach, but didn't turn, comfortable now with his presence in a way that felt both natural and dangerous. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her at the window. "I was thinking about how different this day could have been," she admitted, "if you hadn't been at the station that morning." "But I was," he replied simply. After a moment, he added, "I'm glad of it, Willow." She turned to face him then, struck by the openness in his expression. "So am I." Something shifted between them, in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had been ready to name. Owen moved slightly closer, his hand coming up as if to touch her face before dropping away again. "We should join the others," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Rosa's making hot chocolate." Willow nodded, following him back to the warmth of the fire and the makeshift family they had created, her heart beating a complicated rhythm of hope and fear. January brought bitter cold and a devastating bout of influenza that swept through the region. Willow heard the news from Owen, who returned from a supply run with a grim expression. "Half the town's sick," he reported. "Doc Wilson's overwhelmed. They've set up a temporary hospital in the church." 3 days later, Rosa fell ill, her normally robust constitution no match for the virulent strain. Willow moved the older woman to the main room where the fire could be kept blazing constantly, taking over her duties along with caring for Emma. Owen insisted on helping with Rosa's care, despite Willow's concerns about him becoming sick as well. "She's family," he said simply, and Willow didn't argue further, understanding all too well the depth of his loyalty. For 5 days and nights, they worked in shifts, tending to Rosa's fever and making sure she drank enough to stay hydrated. On the 3rd night, when her fever peaked dangerously high, Willow found Owen on his knees beside Rosa's bed, praying in a low, intense voice she'd never heard from him before. "Please," he was whispering, "not her too. I can't lose anyone else." The naked fear in his words squeezed Willow's heart. She quietly withdrew, giving him privacy for his grief and worry, understanding now that beneath his composed exterior lay a man who had already lost too much. On the 6th day, Rosa's fever broke. By the 8th, she was able to sit up and take broth, though she remained weak. The relief in Owen's eyes when the doctor, finally able to make the journey from town, declared her on the mend, nearly brought Willow to tears. That night, after ensuring Rosa was comfortable and Emma was sleeping soundly, Willow found Owen on the porch despite the freezing temperature. He stood staring up at the star-filled sky, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "You should come inside," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter around herself. "It's too cold to be out here. Just needed some air." He didn't look at her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "And to thank whoever might be listening up there." Willow moved to stand beside him. "I was scared too," she admitted. "Rosa's become dear to me in such a short time." "She practically raised me after my mother died," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "Came to help my parents when I was born and never really left. After the Raiders came, she's the one who kept this place going until I returned from the war." Understanding now what Rosa truly meant to him, Willow impulsively placed her hand on his arm. "She's strong. She'll be fine now." Owen finally turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You're strong too, Willow. The way you've handled everything, Thomas, being alone with Emma, adapting to life here." He shook his head in admiration. "Most people would have broken under half of what you've endured." His praise warmed her despite the cold night. "I've had help. Your help. You would have found a way regardless, he insisted, but I'm glad it was me who found you that night. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. For a moment, Willow thought he might step closer, might finally bridge the careful distance he'd maintained between them. Instead, he exhaled slowly, creating another cloud of vapor between them. We should go in, he said. Early morning tomorrow. Willow nodded, trying to hide her disappointment as they returned to the warmth of the house. Something had shifted again, but she wasn't sure in which direction. February brought milder weather, and the first hints that winter's grip was beginning to loosen. With Rosa recovered but still regaining her strength, Willow had taken on most of the household responsibilities, finding satisfaction in caring for the place that had become their sanctuary. Owen, too, seemed to have opened up since Rosa's illness, sharing more stories about his past, asking more questions about hers. In the evenings, they often sat together after Emma was asleep, sometimes reading, sometimes just talking in the comfortable quiet of the house. One such evening, as a late winter storm rattled the windows, Owen asked the question she'd been dreading. Have you decided what you'll do when spring comes? Willow kept her eyes on her mending, afraid of what he might read in them. I should still try to reach my cousin, I suppose, though it's been months with no reply. You could stay, Owen said, the words coming out in a rush. Here, I mean. The arrangement has worked well, hasn't it? You and Emma. When he trailed off, Willow finally looked up, finding him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Owen. I know it's presumptuous, he continued, setting aside the book he'd been holding. You're still grieving Thomas, and I respect that. But I thought you should know that there's a place for you here, if you want it. The offer hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Willow's mind raced. Stay? Make this temporary refuge permanent? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I never expected. You don't have to answer now, Owen assured her quickly. There's time. I just wanted you to know you have options. Before Willow could respond further, Emma's cry sounded from the bedroom. She rose, grateful for the interruption that would give her time to sort through the tumult of emotions Owen's words had stirred. Thank you, she said simply before going to tend to her daughter. That night, sleep eluded her as she considered his offer. The truth was, she had already begun to think of the ranch as home, of Owen and Rosa as family. Emma was thriving here, and Willow herself had found a peace she hadn't known was possible after the trauma of Thomas's death. But what exactly was Owen offering? A permanent position as his housekeeper? Something more? And was she ready for something more when her husband had been dead less than 6 months? The next morning, determined to clarify matters, Willow sought Owen out in the stable where he was tending to a horse with an injured leg. He looked up as she entered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before his usual composure returned. About last night, she began without preamble. You don't need to decide anything yet, he interrupted. I know, but I need to understand what exactly you're offering, Owen. He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself. He ran a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. I know the timing is wrong. I know you're still wearing Thomas's ring, but I also know that having you and Emma here has made this place feel like a home again, not just somewhere I exist. The raw honesty in his voice touched her. Owen, you asked once if I get lonely, he continued. The truth is, I didn't realize how lonely I was until you came. Now, the thought of you leaving, he shook his head. I'm not asking for promises, just time. Time to see if what I'm feeling, what I think we both might be feeling, could grow into something real. Willow's heart pounded as she absorbed his words. I care for you, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing to speak aloud. More than I expected to, more than I think I should, given everything. But Emma has to be my priority, and I can't risk her happiness or security on something uncertain. I understand that. Owen took a step toward her, still maintaining a respectful distance. Emma will always come first, as she should. I'm just asking you to consider staying while we figure the rest out. No pressure, no expectations beyond what you're comfortable with. It was a generous offer, reflective of the man himself. Willow found herself nodding slowly. All right, When spring comes, we'll stay for a while longer, at least. To see. The smile that transformed Owen's face made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, but he simply nodded. Thank you. As February melted into March, subtle changes occurred in the household. Owen began including Willow in decisions about the ranch, asking her opinion on improvements to the house, discussing his plans for expanding his horse breeding operation. She, in turn, found herself investing more in the place, planting the beginnings of a kitchen garden as the ground thawed, organizing the pantry for maximum efficiency, making lists of supplies they would need for the coming seasons. Seasons, plural. The implication wasn't lost on either of them. Rosa observed these developments with knowing eyes, but made no comment beyond occasionally muttering in Spanish what Willow suspected were prayers of thanksgiving. The older woman had taken to teaching Emma simple words in both English and Spanish, delighting in the baby's attempts to mimic her. She is smart, this one, Rosa declared one afternoon as Emma babbled happily in her lap. Like her mother. Willow smiled, kneading bread dough with firm, practiced motions. I hope she'll have more opportunities than I did, a chance for real education. The senor has many books, Rosa observed casually, and he was university educated before the war. He could teach her much. The implication hung in the air. But Willow merely nodded, not yet ready to discuss the future that seemed to be taking shape around them. That future, however, was forced into the open sooner than either expected. In late March, Owen rode to town for supplies and returned with a letter for Willow from her cousin in Denver at last. Willow read it with mixed emotions. Cousin Margaret apologized for the delayed response, explained that she'd been away caring for her ailing mother, and extended a warm invitation for Willow and Emma to come stay with her family. They had room, she wrote, and connections that could help Willow find suitable employment. It was everything Willow had hoped for when she'd written months ago. Security, family, a fresh start in a thriving city. So, why did the prospect now fill her with such dismay? She found Owen in his study that evening, going over the ranch accounts. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral when he saw the letter in her hand. Your cousin replied, he said. Not a question. Willow nodded. She's invited us to Denver, says she can help me find work. Owen set down his pen, his movements deliberate. I see. When will you leave? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Willow took a deep breath. That depends. On what? On whether there's a reason for us to stay. Their eyes met across the desk, months of growing affection and unspoken longing coming to a head in that one charged moment. Owen stood slowly, moving around the desk until he stood before her. There's every reason for you to stay, Willow, he said, his voice low and intense. If you want to. I need you to be clearer than that, she pressed, needing to hear the words. What exactly are you asking? Owen reached for her hands, holding them gently in his own. I'm asking you to stay, not as my housekeeper or employee, as my partner, my wife, eventually, if you'll have me. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. I love you, Willow. I love Emma. I want us to be a family. The words she'd both hoped for and feared washed over her, bringing a rush of emotion so powerful she had to close her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Owen was watching her with a vulnerability she'd rarely seen in him. I still wear Thomas's ring, she whispered, glancing down at the gold band. I know, and I respect what you had with him. Owen's grip tightened slightly. I'm not asking you to forget him or stop loving him. Just to make room for me, too. Willow felt tears well in her eyes. I already have, she admitted. That's what scares me so much, Owen. I didn't expect to feel this way again, especially not so soon. Sometimes life doesn't follow the schedule we expect, he said softly. Sometimes it gives us second chances when we least expect them. Standing there in the quiet study, Willow knew she faced a crossroads. The safe path led to Denver, to her cousin's home, and the kind of conventional security she'd always been taught to value. The other path, the one that led to a future with this quiet, steadfast man who had saved them in more ways than one, was less certain, but infinitely more appealing. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. Yes, she said, her voice strengthening with certainty. Yes, I'll stay. We'll stay. The smile that broke across Owen's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He stepped closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "May I kiss you, Willow?" Her heart thundering in her chest, she nodded. "Please." His lips met hers softly at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, leaning into him, the kiss deepened, becoming a conversation about everything they'd left unspoken these past months. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Willow felt something inside her unfurl like a flower turning toward the sun. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since Christmas," he confessed. Willow smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months, perhaps years. "I might have let you, if you'd tried." He laughed, the sound rich and warm, and Willow realized she'd never heard him laugh so freely before. It was a sound she wanted to hear again and again. That night, after Emma was asleep, they sat together on the porch swing Owen had installed the previous week. The air held the promise of spring, and in the distance, coyotes called to one another under a bright moon. "I'll write to my cousin tomorrow," Willow said, leaning against Owen's shoulder. "Thank her for the offer, but explain I've found where I belong." Owen's arm tightened around her. "Are you certain? I don't want you to have regrets." "The only thing I'd regret would be leaving," she assured him. "This place it's home now, for me and Emma." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "We'll need to make some changes to the house if we're going to make this official. A proper nursery for Emma, for starters." Willow smiled at his practical approach to their future. "And what about Rosa? How will she feel about this arrangement?" "Rosa has been dropping hints about me finding a wife since I turned 25, Owen replied dryly. "She'll be ecstatic, though I suspect she's already guessed where things were headed. She's an observant woman." "That she is." Owen shifted to look at her more directly. "There's something else we should discuss. The ring." Willow glanced down at her left hand, where Thomas's wedding band still circled her finger. "I'm not ready to take it off yet," she admitted. Would that bother you?" Owen shook his head. "You'll know when it's time. Until then, it's part of who you are. Part of what made you the woman I love." He hesitated before adding, "But I'd like to give you another ring to wear alongside it, when you're ready. A promise of our future together, not just a memorial to your past." Touched by his understanding, Willow leaned up to kiss him softly. "I'd like that. Not just yet, but soon." In April, as wildflowers began to carpet the meadows around the ranch, Owen rode to town and returned with a small velvet box. That evening, after a special dinner prepared by a beaming Rosa, he formally asked Willow to marry him, presenting her with a delicate silver ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her right hand, respecting her wish to keep Thomas's ring in place for now. "She would have loved you." "And I would have loved her," Willow replied, admiring the way the pearl caught the lamplight. "It's beautiful, Owen. Thank you." They agreed to wait until fall for the wedding, giving Emma time to grow stronger, and Willow time to fully settle into her new life. The months that followed were filled with plans and preparations, expanding the kitchen garden, redecorating the blue room into a proper nursery for Emma, clearing space for Willow's sewing room. Rosa thrived on the increased activity in the house, delighting in helping plan the wedding feast and teaching Willow recipes that had been in the Aldridge family for generations. "For when you have more babies," she explained with a meaningful look that made Willow blush. The thought of expanding their family had already crossed Willow's mind, though she kept such musings to herself for now. Emma was thriving, growing into a curious, active toddler who followed Owen adoringly around the ranch whenever he allowed it, which was often. Watching them together, his large hands gently guiding her tiny ones as she helped feed the chickens or brush a patient horse, Willow felt a contentment she'd once thought forever beyond her reach. In June, on the anniversary of Thomas's death, Willow rode with Owen to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. There, beside a clear stream bordered by wildflowers, she removed her first husband's ring. "I'll always love you," she whispered, thinking of the young man who had dreamed so big and lived so briefly. "But it's time for me to live fully again." With Owen watching silently, she wrapped the ring carefully in a handkerchief, tucking it into a small wooden box he had carved for the purpose. "For Emma," she explained, "when she's old enough to understand who her father was." Owen nodded, his eyes reflecting his understanding of the significance of the moment. "He'll always be part of our family, through her." On their way back to the ranch, they stopped in town, where Willow posted a letter to her cousin in Denver, inviting her family to the wedding in September. The second letter she posted was to her parents in Missouri, the first communication since she'd left with Thomas 2 years earlier. It was time to rebuild those bridges as well, to create a family circle as wide and strong as the Wyoming sky. Summer passed in a blur of activity haying, preserving garden produce for winter, finalizing wedding plans. Owen expanded his horse breeding operation, securing a contract with the Army that promised financial stability for years to come. Willow, finding unexpected joy in ranch life, began experimenting with growing medicinal herbs, using knowledge passed down from her grandmother to create remedies that soon gained a reputation in the surrounding area. In late August, Willow's cousin Margaret arrived with her husband and 2 children, followed a week later by Willow's parents. The reunion was initially awkward, her father still harboring resentment over her choice of Thomas. Her mother, uncertain how to bridge the gap created by 2 years of silence. But Emma's sunny presence and Owen's quiet dignity gradually thawed the tension, and by the week of the wedding, genuine warmth had begun to replace strained politeness. "He's a good man," Willow's father acknowledged gruffly one evening as they watched Owen teaching Margaret's boys how to throw a lasso. "Solid, not like—" He trailed off, but Willow understood. "Thomas was a good man too, Papa," she said gently. "Just different. He gave me Emma." Her father nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "You've done well for yourself, Willow. Built a good life here." The admission clearly cost him, but the pride in his eyes told Willow all she needed to know. On September 15, 1877, almost exactly 10 months after she'd sat exhausted and desperate in Sweetwater Station, Willow married Owen Aldridge in the meadow behind their home. Emma, now 16 months old, and dressed in a tiny white dress sewn by Rosa, was carried down the improvised aisle by Willow's mother, scattering flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Owen waited beside the minister, tall and handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Willow as she approached, in a simple gown of ivory silk. Rosa had woven wildflowers into her hair instead of a veil, and she carried a bouquet of late summer blooms from their garden. "You are so beautiful," Owen whispered when she reached him, his voice rough with emotion. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with vows they had written themselves, promises of partnership, respect, and a love that had grown from compassion into something deep and enduring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to Willow's eyes. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with neighbors from miles around joining the family for a feast prepared by Rosa and Willow's mother, who had formed an unexpected alliance in the kitchen. Music, dancing, and laughter filled the ranch that had once been so quiet, transforming it just as Willow and Emma had transformed Owen's solitary life. As twilight deepened into night and the guests began to depart, Owen found Willow sitting on the porch swing, watching Emma sleep in her grandmother's arms. "Happy?" he asked, joining her on the swing. Willow leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, soap, leather, and the indefinable essence that was simply Owen. "Completely," she replied. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He wrapped an arm around her, drawing her closer. "When I saw you that morning in the station, I had no idea how much my life was about to change." "Neither did I," Willow admitted. "I was just trying to survive another day." "And now?" She smiled up at him, her heart full. "Now, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. We're living." Later that night, after the last guests had departed and Emma had been settled in her nursery, now watched over by Rosa, who had insisted the newlyweds deserved privacy, Willow and Owen stood in the doorway of what was now truly their bedroom. "Nervous?" Owen asked, noting her hesitation. "A little," she admitted. "It's been a long time, and even then—" She blushed, unable to articulate that her brief marriage to Thomas had left her with limited experience in such matters. Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing the wedding band that now gleamed alongside her engagement ring. We have all the time in the world, Willow. Tonight, tomorrow, all the nights to come. We'll find our way together. His patience, his understanding. These were the qualities that had first drawn her to him, that continued to deepen her love for him with each passing day. Willow reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I love you, Owen Aldridge," she whispered. "Thank you for finding us that day." "I think perhaps we found each other," he replied, lowering his head to kiss her with a passion no longer restrained by propriety or uncertainty. As they crossed the threshold together into their shared future, Willow knew with absolute certainty that what had begun as an act of kindness in a deserted railway station had blossomed into the greatest blessing of her life, a love strong enough to heal past wounds and build a future bright with promise. 1 year later, in the golden light of another Wyoming autumn, Willow sat in the same porch swing, now with 2 children in her lap, Emma, now a chattering 2.5-year-old, and 2-month-old James Thomas Aldridge, named for both his grandfathers. Owen joined them, fresh from the fields, his face lighting up at the sight of his family. "There's my beautiful wife and our perfect children," he said, bending to kiss Willow before taking Emma into his arms, spinning her around as she giggled in delight. "Papa, story!" Emma demanded, pointing toward the house where her favorite books awaited. "After dinner, little one," he promised. "Mama needs help with your brother." As if on cue, baby James began to fuss, and Willow adjusted him against her shoulder, patting his back soothingly. Owen sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. Emma settled on his lap. "Rosa says the first snow will come early this year," he remarked, gazing at the mountains in the distance where dark clouds were beginning to gather. "Then, we'd better enjoy these last warm days," Willow replied, leaning against him contentedly. "Do you ever think about that night?" Owen asked suddenly. "At the station?" Willow nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. "Often. How close we came to never meeting. If you'd been delayed, if you'd chosen a different route. If you'd refused my offer," Owen added with a slight smile. "I'm glad I didn't," she said softly, looking from Emma's bright face to the tiny bundle in her arms, then up to the man who had become the center of her world. "I'm glad I took a chance on a kind stranger. And I'm glad I followed my instincts that night," Owen replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Best decision I ever made." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Willow Aldridge surveyed the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy, a loving husband, 2 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, and a future limited only by the horizons they chose to set for themselves. From that desperate night in Sweetwater Station to this moment of perfect contentment, the journey had been neither straight nor easy. There had been grief and healing, caution and courage, patience and passion. But sitting here, surrounded by the family that had formed against all odds, Willow knew that every step had led exactly where she was meant to be home, in the truest sense of the word. As Emma began to sing a nonsense song of her own creation, and baby James drifted to sleep against her chest, Willow met Owen's gaze and saw in it the same certainty that filled her own heart. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, bound by a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into something strong enough to last a lifetime.